Shalom, and welcome to Tov, the Jewish news channel. I'm Ruchi Avital, and we have with us today Marc Zell, who is an attorney and also the chairman of the Republican Overseas in Israel. And I'm a little confused, I have to say. We started the war with what seemed like unbelievable support on the part of the United States, sending us materiel, arms, bombs, as much as we needed. There was just coming in dozens of planes, even hundreds coming in every day with equipment, supplies, armaments, ammunition. And now we are hearing that and they were against a ceasefire at the beginning, even though all over the world there were those talking about ceasefires. And now we're hearing, not openly yet so much, but a little bit, we're hearing that they want us to stop the fighting, that they want this hostage exchange deal or prisoner exchange deal as a way to get Israel to halt the war. What do they want from us?
Well, that's an excellent question, Ruchi. And I have to say, I think Israelis went a little bit over the edge in their reaction to the American offer of help in the very beginning of this war. Many of us looked and read between the lines of President Biden's statements and others in his cabinet and so on, and understood that the American support was qualified, even from the beginning. The Americans said was, in the very beginning, we will do everything, we have Israel's back, we will do everything we can to help Israel defend itself. But the Americans were never particularly keen on having the Israelis go into Gaza. You remember at the end of October when the land campaign began, the Americans weighed in against commencing the land campaign. They did provide us, and it's very important to note, and we are very grateful for the fact that they provided us with needed ammunition and other war material in order for us to carry out the war. But also remember, it was the Obama administration a few years ago who basically said that if you want to have American military aid, $37.8 billion of it over a 10-year period, you're going to need to buy all of your war material, your ammunitions, and so on from the United States, and forget about manufacturing it yourself. And that, of course, Israel agreed to that, and that was a major, in my view, a major mistake on the part of Israel at the time.
I think everybody realizes that now.
Okay,
I think
so
everybody,
as the war
we're hearing
went on,
that there is manufacturing already starting here in Israel.
Yes, thank God. But as the war went on, the American demands became the American conditions that were between the lines in the beginning became very much overt and on the black and white print, and that then we saw them saying things like, we need a ceasefire, you need to bring in huge quantities of what they call humanitarian aid to Gaza. This is unprecedented in the history of warfare, where a state that's at war with its enemies needs to provide succor in the form of humanitarian aid to the enemy while the war is going on. It's rather incredible. Even the International Court of Justice weighed in on that.
This is a dumb question. I know this is a dumb question, but I mean, theoretically, or not so theoretically, Egypt could have provided that aid. All that stuff could have come through Rafah. Isn't that the case?
First of all, Egypt was providing that aid. So was Jordan, and the Arab countries were doing that. What Egypt wasn't doing, and this is another strange thing, is that Egypt which has a long border with the Gaza Strip, did not allow any of the Gazans who wanted to flee the fighting, as refugees do in every conflict, to come into Egypt. And or to go any place else in the world. This is the first conflict that I'm aware of where, where a country was, or the object of a civilian population in warfare was denied the opportunity to flee the fighting. I mean, take a look at what happened in Ukraine or any other place. Millions fled the fighting hopefully with hope to return after the fighting was completed. But in Gaza, they weren't allowed to leave. It's unprecedented.
In other words, Egypt actually turned Gaza into an open air prison, not Israel.
Right. They weren't going to come into, well, Israel wasn't going to let them to come into Israel.
Well, obviously, they're an enemy entity.
Absolutely. But Egypt, which professed to be concerned about the welfare of the civilian population, along with other Arab states in the region, did nothing to relieve the pressure on these citizens by letting them flee the very field of battle. It's rather extraordinary. But when it comes to Israel,
think about it, we know that the existence of these so-called refugees, 75 years after the fact, very, very few of them who are actual refugees from 1948, extremely few. We know that the only purpose of keeping them as refugees in that status is to destroy Israel. Because if you don't solve the refugee problem...
Issue. Okay, so that's an interesting point you're raising. Why are these people still treated, those who lived in Gaza before October 7th, why are they still classified as refugees for purposes of United Nations and international support? That is your point. That's an excellent point. 75 years, the people in Gaza have had their refugee status perpetuated in order to use them as a political weapon against Israel. That was true when UNRWA, the United Nations agency that takes care of the Palestinian refugees, and only them, was founded in 1950-51, and is true today. In fact, today, as we know, in the case of UNRWA, they're not only supporting the civilians, but they're actively participating in the conflict against Israel. How many? 12 of the or 13 of the UNRWA employees were actually participated in the October 7th atrocities.
And a couple UNRWA teachers had hostages in their homes.
Exactly. So this whole
that we know of could be more.
It's just right. There may well be more, and this whole conflict is just really on its head. And the United States continues. It since the war has allowed over $100 million to go into the coffers of UNRWA, only suspending something like $300,000 after all of this was known. Incredible.
Well, you have to ask. I mean, you have to wonder. I mean, I remember for many, many years, there's always this difference of approach between, say, the Congress and the State Department, where Congress has always we've always enjoyed bipartisan support in Congress for many, many years. But the State Department has always been more pro-Arab and less pro-Israel. And we're seeing it now. We're seeing that dualism in American foreign policy, where we're seeing Blinken, Secretary Blinken, saying one thing, and the Congress saying another thing. It's really it's worrying. It's worrying.
Well, and look, you also have to realize that it has to do with partisan politics as well. I mean, I'm the chairman of the Republican Party. The Republican Party has been here in Israel, and the Republican Party in the Congress and throughout the last decade or two has been strongly pro-Israel, whereas the Democratic Party, unfortunately, has not been and has gone the other direction. And then it's not an accident, for example, that when President Biden went to Michigan, to campaign there, where they have a large Arab American community, all of a sudden this notorious executive order came out against the settlers when he was in Michigan. So
yeah, I was extremely shocked by that. I have to ask you, what exactly? We've never seen anything quite like that before. To single out individuals and sanction them, and then we hear that Bank Leumi closed the bank account of one of these people. No proof, no trial, no due process, no anything. Just why? I mean, we've seen this
It's
report
actually
on
worse
so-called
than you.
settler violence, and it seems that that report defines any altercation, any interaction between settlers and Palestinians that becomes violent as settler violence, even if, as is the case in probably 99% of those cases, that it is instigated by Palestinians against settlers, and the settler violence amounts to basically self-defense on the part of the settlers.
Well, all right, I'm not going to get too much into the weeds here on this, but I can tell you that it's not just about the orders of sanctions against the four gentlemen. It's about what the executive order it says. There's two things that you need to keep in mind. The authority for issuing those sanctions against the four people came under an executive order that was issued by the White House on February 1st. I'm holding it in my hand here. And that executive order is really unprecedented because it says that anybody that's engaged in, is complicit in, or has directly or indirectly engaged or attempted to engage in, for example, actions. What are actions that are prohibited under this executive order? Directing, enacting, implementing, enforcing, or failing to enforce policies that threaten the peace, security, or stability of the West Bank. And one of those policies, Ruchi, is support for or opposition to a two-state solution. So
Wow.
under the executive order, as opposed to the sanction letter that went out from the Treasury Department against the four individuals, under the executive order, if you theoretically oppose the two-state solution, like many of us do, or you're a U.S. charity or organization, 501c3, that supports someone, foreign national, that opposes the two-state solution, theoretically, the way this executive order is written, they can seize your bank accounts, cancel your contracts. If you're a foreign national wanting to come to the United States, cancel your visa or prevent you from coming to the United States. It's draconian. And there's never been anything quite like this executive order in the history of the United States sanction program.
Well, an
It's
executive
amazing.
order, I mean, I know it's existed for quite some time. It only became known, I think, during Obama's terms as president.
No,
It was
this
something
is a
very
brand new
rare.
executive.
No, no, I'm saying the
Barrett, this is a
idea of an
brand new.
executive order, not passing a law through Congress and so on and so forth, but just the
No,
president said,
this
this,
executive order is brand new. It's February 1st.
no, no, I
And
understand
there
that
have been,
this one is new, but the whole concept of an executive order, something that is
well,
actionable,
that they've
is a
had
fairly
since the
new,
time of George Washington. I mean,
right,
George
it
Washington had
existed, but it was extremely rare. And it became kind of popular. It was a way for Obama to get things done that the Congress wouldn't agree with him. And then
well,
Biden,
that's
and then Trump reversed a lot of the damage that Obama did by
yeah,
using
right.
executive orders for the same reason. And now we're seeing this type of thing. Is there any way to fight it?
Well, the answer is yes. And you'll be hearing more about this, I think, in the days and weeks to come. When President Trump tried to change U.S. foreign policy through executive orders rather than legislation, a lot of lawsuits were brought in, including some that went to the Supreme Court. And that's the kind of thing that we're going to need to be doing now. We'll be doing that in connection with this executive order, which is really unusual. It's not something that we've seen before. We've had executive orders, as I said, all the way back to the time of George Washington, but nothing like this one, which is attempting really to shut the debate, the public debate about policy issues which are highly controversial, by threatening the participants in that debate with this extraordinary range of financial sanctions and immigration sanctions that were only used in cases where the national security of the United States was directly affected. For example, in connection with the Russia-Ukraine war, or to fight corruption in foreign governments and that were affecting the international economy, or governments that were like in Venezuela that were that came into power through illicit means. But nothing like this. This is something that is beyond the pale, Ruchi.
Wow. So I'm going to ask you a question, and you can, of course, choose not to answer. We read that Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir gave an interview to the Wall Street Journal a couple days ago, and in it he kind of said the quiet part out loud. He said that these things would not happen with Trump, and it seems like interference on the part of an Israeli minister in internal American politics. Is that a way to look at that? Is that legitimate in your opinion?
Well, look, I think it was impolitic, all right, for the internal security minister to make the statement that he made. I have to say that I agree with the statement. I can say it. I'm the chairman of the Republican Party here in Israel and the vice president of the Republican Party internationally. So I can make statements like that. I don't think that's necessarily the kind of thing that an Israeli government minister should be saying. But having said that, I will say that, and as I have said on this program and in other media outlets, had President Trump been reelected in 2020, many things wouldn't have happened as they've happened since during the Biden administration, including the Russian-Ukrainian war, the deterioration of relations with China, the sudden aggressiveness of North Korea, the aggressiveness and terrorism that's been sponsored by Iran and Yemen and other places and around us, and including, in my view, the war that Hamas began against us on October 7th. I think during the Trump administration, these adversaries of the United States and Western civilization were very, very wary about crossing then President Trump, because precisely they did not know how he would react. And that, of course, is a tactic that President Trump has used as a businessman in negotiations and as president of the United States very, very effectively. This president, Joe Biden and his administration, hearkening back to the policies, kind of the lead from behind policies of the Obama administration, of which he was also a part, has created the impression, both from Afghanistan and a whole series of foreign policy failures after Afghanistan, that the United States is weak, and because the United States is perceived to be weak, the enemies of the United States, and many of whom are enemies of Israel as well, are feel free to engage and embark upon adventurous campaigns that are aimed at upsetting and in fact do upset and destabilize the world order. It's happened in the Middle East. It's happened around the world. Even in Latin America, with Venezuela threatening to invade Guyana, you couldn't have believed such a thing during the Trump administration. Now it's become standard fare. Even when the United States was attacked directly here in the Middle East, in Syria and Iraq and in Jordan, it took them a month or 6 weeks to react. And even when they did react, incredibly, they gave advance notice of their attack to the Iranians, who were able to evacuate most of their people from the targets. and then same thing is true in Yemen with the Houthis.
Which is just the opposite of what President Trump related just this week, where the Iranians felt they had to respond, and they had to respond to the assassination of Soleimani, but they gave a warning and they missed with high precision missiles, and they missed every single target. So that's just
it's beyond comprehension, Ruchi, what has happened in a span of just a little more than 3 years, how things can go south so quickly, just because the administration in Washington is projecting this whole image of weakness and incompetence, stemming from the president's own personal frailties, physically and mentally, and the failure of the policies that his administration has embraced.
And
we can only hope.
Added to that, we unfortunately have been forced to fight a war since October 7th. And I think everyone was amazingly encouraged by the valor and willingness of the Israeli reserves that just showed up and are fighting like lions. And in the United States, people are wondering, do we have an army? Do we have people willing to fight? They haven't had a draft for 40 years now or something like that. I don't think, a lot of the people in the, the coastal elites, I don't think they know anybody who's ever been in the army, or anybody's father who's served in the army, or mother, you're supposed to say now. They don't even, it's something only, poor people go because they can't get another job or something. It's not something to be proud of today, that you served your country in the military. And it's very worrying. I mean, well, America hasn't had to fight a war at home ever since the Civil War. But
America is fighting a war at home on its southern border right now.
Oh,
Ruki,
yeah, it's not fighting. But it's not fighting. But it's not fighting.
No, it's not. I want to thank you for pointing out something that's very important. My sons and thousands of other sons and husbands and siblings in Israel have come at something quite extraordinary. Gershon Cohen, the former head of the Israeli War College, mentioned this yesterday in an interview, that is almost miraculous, the extent to which our young people, 20, 30, 40-year-old men and women, have come from their homes when the orders came to report for duty after
even
the October
orders.
7th.
Even without orders.
Hundreds of thousands came to fight and went into Israel from all parts of into Gaza from all parts of the political spectrum, unifying this country. It's something really to behold. Really very, very proud of all of our fighting men and women. What happens in the United States, well, we'll have to see. But at least in Israel,
yes,
we have the great generation is not something we think about 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. It's here right now in our own homes.
And as much as people said they're Gen Z and all they do is look at their screens all day long, but apparently that Z was Zionism. And
good for you. I like it.
When they were called, or even without being called, when they knew they were needed, they just got up and went to fight.
And they're still fighting.
And they're still fighting. And we pray for their safe return. But let's get the job done.
Exactly. I'm with you 100%, Ruki. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Marc Zell, the chairman of Republicans Overseas. And thank you to our viewers. Don't forget to subscribe on all our media channels. Shalom.